first glance, you see the star of Home Alone and instantly think kid-friendly. Nope, rated R. How in the world can this be R?
Don't fuck with me.
Yeah, I'm sure we are all thinking, what is this? Well, let's find out. Mark is an ordinary boy doing ordinary things, but we see his mom is ill in the hospital. He makes a promise to her she won't die, that she will come back in a different person. She eventually dies, and his father needs to go to Japan to make a business deal, so Mark stays with his uncle and aunt's house, which is where we see Henry. Look how we are first introduced to Henry. He pops up, we see him from the back, and he turns his head slowly. We get a very evilish vibe from his body behavior. Even when they all meet, Henry makes these creepy masks. At the dinner table, he smashes a lobster very aggressively. The next day, we see Henry smoke cigarettes. Smoking isn't a big deal, but at his age, come on. Then we see Henry has this contraption he built that's simply a shooting device. Mark tells him to shoot near the cat, and Henry does, but his intentions were to shoot at the cat. He even goes off that evil look towards us, the viewers. Mark starts to realize Henry's devilish acts when he shoots and kills a dog that chased him on the bridge. While all this is happening, Mark has a therapist he goes and talks to about him coping after his mother's death. He explains she will be back and that she isn't really dead. Now at this point in the movie, we start to wonder why Henry is so evil. Why does he do this stuff and not feel bad for his intentions? We learn about Richard. We see Mark go in his room. Richard was the baby brother of Henry. Richard drowned in the bathtub, and Susan believes it was her fault because she felt she left him there fine with enough water, so she feels guilty about Richard's death. So we see Susan and Mark share similar feelings, since they both feel responsible for deaths in their family. Mark comes to the realization that his mom is now Susan. He is convinced she is his mom now. Of course, Henry sees this and is not fond of that at all. He also notices Mark and Connie, Henry's sisters, start to get along and play together. Henry threatens to hurt Connie just because he sees Mark cares about her. We clearly see Henry is sick. To him, this is all fun and games. To him, about taking people away from others. If he doesn't get what he wants, death comes into his mind. Just earlier, Henry throws a dummy onto the freeway and causes a crazy car crash. After Henry explains why he does what he does, because he's not afraid, to his logic, since he's not scared of anything, he can do whatever he wants. Now that's some crazy thinking, almost like a murderer or something. Which leads to Henry trying to kill Connie. He throws her into the vulnerable ice and she falls. He makes it look like he is trying his best to save her, but he's really not. She doesn't die, she is saved in time, but you can clearly see Henry is in disappointment. This is when Mark tries to tell Susan and his therapist of Henry. Susan gets mad and doesn't believe Mark at first, but later on does actually start to think about Henry. We notice Mark likes to stand in wide open spaces, same with Susan. This is another trait that makes these two connect with each other. Mark starts to try to tell everybody that Henry is evil, but nobody listens to him. Henry makes it sound like he has problems. Mark even gets fed up and tries to stab Henry with scissors. At this point, I don't blame Mark. He knows exactly what Henry is capable of. He tries his best to make them all aware. Susan does start to wonder later on. She does go to the shed Henry keeps all his stuff, and she finds Richard's rubber duck. We find out that that rubber duck was Henry's first, and he didn't like that it became Richard's. Susan gets mad at Henry for taking it, and he grabs it and throws it in the well. This is when Susan knows something is up with Henry, and that Henry possibly did kill Richard. We now know Henry has serious problems. So now this is it. Henry plans to kill his own mother, but he tells Mark that, hey, it's not my mom anymore, it's your mom, remember? So it doesn't really matter. Your mom, my mom, she's all our moms, but he knows that Mark really believes that Susan is his mother now, so now that makes him just care about her a lot less. So they walk to the cliff, and Henry pushes her off, but Mark comes and they both fight. Susan gets back up, but both fall over. She has both of them and can only save one. She chooses Mark, and Henry falls to his death. Seeing that, we can see it must have been hard for a mother to make that decision to choose Mark over her own son, but hey, he tried to kill her, so we all know she made the right choice. This just makes it more proof about the connection Mark and Susan have together. They both like to stand in spots, and Probably at this point, Susan probably felt that Mark was now her son instead of Henry, which is why she let Henry go. But looking back at the whole movie, we never get a real explanation on why Henry is so evil. Why does he think this way? I mean, he said he's not afraid, but how can a boy from a nice family act this way? This to me is what makes the film so interesting. All of us can think up theories, but we will never know. When Mark is talking to the therapist about evil, she says she doesn't believe in evil. Evil is something we say to people when we have given up trying to help a person, which does make a lot of sense. A person can be helped to be good, but not in the good, son. We learn that evil exists just because. There doesn't have to be a reason. There doesn't have to be some long backstory and explanation as to why a human being does bad stuff. In a way, that is what makes the good son that much scarier. Evil exists around us, and sometimes, instead of trying to understand, it's just best to end their evilish acts.
Don't fuck with me.